Hello everybody, it is I, Caroline, Leanne's daughter and owner of Inherited Salt, my own little online food corner of the internet. So, last time I went live, I talked a lot about sourdough, and it seemed to be a pretty popular subject for a lot of you, and a lot of you had a lot of questions. So, I am here today to answer some of those. This is my bread corner. I have all my bread books. I have these 2 loaves that I just got out of the oven today. I'm very excited. I'm going to cut into one of them and have some butter with it. But yeah, why don't we, well, no, I won't cut into yet. So, yesterday I posted on Saving Dinner asking if anyone had any questions about sourdough, and a couple people replied, and so I'll go ahead and answer some of those questions now. Perfect. So 2 people asked about, and feel free to ask questions in the comments on this video. I have my handy dandy cameraman, aka the Hubs, and he can tell me what your questions are. So a couple people were asking about gluten-free starter. I have never tried gluten-free starter. I am still pretty new to the sourdough universe. I've only been doing it for, I guess, like a month and a half now. So I don't have any gluten-free starter because I eat gluten. I'm not gluten-free. So, but I can refer you to an excellent source because I've seen her bread. It is beautiful. I've had a couple friends that have had it before and have said it's fantastic. So there's a cookbook. It's in her cookbook. Unfortunately, it's not in her site. And I'll link this in my shop. I don't have it in my shop yet, but I'll go and link everything that I talk about in my shop so you guys can find it all easily. But there is a cookbook called Cannelle et Vanille, and it's French, and it's by Iran Goyoga. And she is this really beautiful food blogger from the Seattle area, and she's gluten-free. And so all of her recipes are gluten-free, and she's really mastered gluten-free bread. Like, it is incredible. Like, the crumb looks so good. Because I've seen some sourdough starters that are gluten-free that people have shared or posted, but it's still, like, the crumb looks really dense. Like, it doesn't look like sourdough, but hers, you couldn't, like, looking at it, you wouldn't know that it was gluten-free. Like, it's incredible. And I know that her gluten-free sourdough starter recipe is in her cookbook, which is called, it's named after her blog. It's called Cannelle et Vanille. And like I said, I'll link that in my little online shop so you guys can find it, because I know it's kind of hard with the French words, but okay, so that answers the gluten-free question. Gretchen asked, my starter is bubbly, but after a week still isn't doubling in size. Should I start over? No. It can take, to get like a happy, active starter that you can use, it can take up to like 2-ish weeks, even longer. Like, I followed someone, it took her almost a month before her starter finally got to a place where it was ready to use. If there's bubbles, that means it's alive. So,
yeah, I mean, we have some starter here too.
I'll show you. Like, I haven't fed these guys. They're really hungry because I haven't fed them since yesterday. And so the bubbles aren't, like, you can see it rose and then fell. And the bubbles aren't very big like they normally are when it's, like, really ready to rock and roll. It's still, they're very tiny, but it means it's still alive. It's just hungry and wants to be fed.
And just while we're on it, these are WEC jars. A lot of people were asking where we got them.
Yes, okay, so people were asking about my WEC jars last time, which is why I brought these out. But just for Gretchen, don't start over. Keep going. Your starter's doing great. If it's bubbling, it's alive, and that's what you want. So just keep going. It could just take a few more days, which I know is hard. The trick with sourdough is it's a time game. Like, it's about having patience and being willing to wait. But I promise, I mean, the payoff is worth it. Just look at this guy.
Before we start on the WEC jars, Catherine is asking, what if it smells almost alcoholic?
What if it smells almost alcoholic? So it will release a scent, but it does release ethanol, which is alcohol. Usually, And like it will, like usually if it smells alcoholic, there's typically like a clear liquid on top, which would be like the alcohol. And that's usually just your starter telling you that it's really hungry, it wants to be refreshed and fed.
Yeah.
And so there you have it.
Cool.
But yeah, like everyone's starter, like everyone will describe how their starter smells kind of differently, but it's normally like sour. Some people will be like, oh, it smells like yogurt or dirty socks or whatever. All of that means it's alive. It's happy. It's ready to go.
No mold, so you're good.
Yeah, no mold. You don't want mold. And so, yeah, it's just kind of part of the fun fermenting process of sourdough. And so it can vary. But so, weck jars. Someone asked, I saw the comment on the other video about how I took like the handles off or whatever. So this is typically what a weck jar looks like.
Yeah.
And honestly, this size would be great for starters. These were just the weck jars I had on hand that didn't have anything going on. So they're who I chose to be my starter vessels. But this would actually also be probably even a better size. But I have them linked on my online shop too. But I like weck jars. They're just a little bit pricier than like the average mason jar, but a mason jar works as well. So weck jars, they have these little metal grips that seals them, and then they come with this little ring. So why I don't have these on is because you want to give your starter a little breathing room. Like you want a lid, but you want a loose fitting lid. Because if you seal it, it creates gas, and then you will have like an exploding jar, which you don't need. Like the lid will try to bust up. But yeah, so this is just raw sugar in here. But yeah, this is what the weck jar usually looks like. It has its little seal and these little metal clasps. But yeah, so I just keep the seal and clasps off my starter so it can breathe. It has a loose fitting lid. But here's also like a mason jar. Now what I would recommend with using a regular mason jar is if I don't have one, at least not the one I could find before coming on here today, but if you can get one that has like a wide mouth, like a weck jar, because there's wide mouth mason jars, so you can stick your hand in, that would be ideal. But with a mason jar, don't put on the little twisty doodad. You just want the little lid to sit on top like that, and it'd be good to go.
Catherine said she has no liquid on hers, but it bubbles and just has that smell a little bit.
When did you last feed your starter, Catherine? That's what I'll ask.
We can come back to that.
Yeah. So these are the jars. And something I just learned in this last week, because I spend basically all my free time now researching sourdough and bread, is that it's better to mix your starter by hand. I've been using just a metal spoon, which I think you guys saw in my last video. I did a demonstration. But apparently it's better to mix it by hand because mixing it by hand improves the microbiome of your starter. And what's a microbiome, you ask? It's basically like the little, the ecology of all the little microorganisms living in your starter. Because like we have a microbiome, the earth has a microbiome, anything living has a microbiome. And so that just helps it, just having a little contact because of whatever's on your hand. I mean, use clean hands, you know, don't go to the restroom and then mix your starter. Yeah, use clean hands to mix, but yeah, it's better, and it's a process. Like my mom hates it. I think you probably heard her complaining, excuse me, in her video this morning about how she isn't loving the starter lifestyle. I like it, but I'm someone where I like kind of the slower processes with food. And I think what a common misconception with food is if it takes more time, it's really hard. And it's not that it's hard, it's just not going to be like instant gratification. It takes time, it takes effort. And I like how hands-on sourdough is. I like getting my hand in there and mixing the starter. I like using my hand to mix my dough. It just, you know, creates more of a connection with your food, and it's just how things were done, you know, back in the old days.
Catherine said that she fed it today.
She fed it today? Okay, well then I think you're probably fine. Like every starter is going to smell...
I would say even these two smell a little different from each other.
Yeah, these two smell different. I mean, I feed them with different flours, and so that's part of the reason, but yeah, it will just kind of smell different at different times of its during the fermenting process. Like it'll release different smells. So like when I bake, I like to refresh my starter a few times leading up to baking. So I usually refresh it like twice the day before and then 2 times before baking the next day. So I will refresh it like, you know, usually around like 4 o'clock the evening before, and then one more time before I go to bed. And I keep it in a cozy spot so it'll rise and peak as it needs to, a little bit faster. And then the next day I'll get up early and I'll feed it and refresh it in the morning. And then I will wait a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours, until it peaks again. I keep it warm. I have this, Samuel, my husband, he's doing kombucha, and he has this little kombucha heating pad. And so I'll usually like kind of wrap it around my starters if I'm trying to rev it up a little bit. And so that way it gets like nice and kind of sweet yeast smelling, and it's like really active and really happy. And so that will give you a really nice loaf, and it'll give you a loaf that's not going to be overwhelmingly like funky, just because some sourdough can be a little funky in flavor. And that's, you know, like if your starter's ripeness is a little, like it's not as young and whatnot as it could be.
Catherine said her loaves are coming out great, but she said she's been feeding it once, not twice a day. Is she starving it?
You might be. Like it.
How do you know?
So you'll know like if your loaf is hungry, or your starter is hungry, because like on top, like it's kind of disappeared. But usually like after the peak happens and right before it starts to sink down, it will get like a little dimple across the top, which means she wants to be fed. It's like this little crease, a little line in the top of the starter.
And then Sarah asked, what does refresh it mean?
Refresh it means feeding. So you're gonna discard, and I have a couple questions on discard. So let me answer those in answering Sarah. So Gretchen also asked how much should she discard before feeding? And Amy asked, do I always have to take off a third before feeding? So for Amy, you need to be taking off more than a third before you feed. When I discard almost everything, but like the very bottom of it. So discarding means like you're refreshing it, you're feeding it, you're getting rid of what's up here and giving it new flour and water to feed off of, to keep it growing, to keep it healthy, to keep it in a place where it will act as yeast. It's creating yeast for you to use when you bake. And so it can be wasteful. One of the bakers from Tartine Bakery, which is like this incredible bakery in San Francisco, the head of bread, she's been doing a lot of Instagram videos about sourdough during quarantine, and she just said like, something she said that I really liked was that you kind of have to think of your starter as a pet. And it feels wasteful to get rid of the discard when you're not using it to make your loaf, and you're just, because you just have to feed your starter. But you kind of have to think of it as like, that's cat food or dog food or whatever pet you have. It's like kind of treating flour and water for it the same way. And I am working on some fun discard recipes. Because like, I know it gets confusing, but you do use your discard when it's like ripe and healthy and like peaking to make a loaf.
These are discard loaves, correct? Made with discard? Oh no, they're not.
No, these are loaves. But you know, there's times like you're gonna have discard. Like right now, these are not at their peak. They've risen and sunk. But I'm gonna work on some fun recipes so you can still use this, because I mean it's still like good fermented flour and water. Yeah. So I'm gonna try to brainstorm some fun alternative ways to use discard. But for now, it's kind of just being tossed outside in the compost pile.
It is good compost though. Yeah,
good compost. And I feel like that's like probably the hardest thing for a lot of people is the waste of discard. But yeah, so refreshing means feeding. It's the same thing. So you discard, and I have this on my blog post that I have linked in the caption of this video. But when I discard, I get rid of everything except 50 grams of starter. and which is a very small amount. And at first when I first started, I was like, oh God, like this is too, like there's not enough in there, but that's all it needs to like feed off of. Usually when I bake, I have started leaving in a little bit more when I'm trying to like rev up my starter and I'm doing pretty regular, like pretty quick feedings every couple hours. And I'll get more into that. I'm working on a blog post now that kind of goes into more of like the baking side. But just in terms of basic starter upkeep, I discard everything but 50 grams. 50 grams is literally just basically covers the bottom of here. Like it's just like the tiniest little bit. I think a scale is kind of crucial with this so you can know. And then I add in 100 grams of warm water and 100 grams of flour. I use 50 grams bread flour and 50 grams for Cordelia. She gets 50 grams rye, and then little Sebastian here gets 50 grams bread and 50 grams red Fife. So, yeah.
And if you didn't want to feed them every day, can you put them in the fridge?
You can put them in the fridge to slow them down, so that way you don't have to feed and refresh every day. So if you're not going to be baking regularly, you can just throw them in the fridge and feed it at least once a week. If you are, or like when you bake, if you're going to bake once or twice a week, like you need to feed it before you use it to bake. You need to bring it out, kind of let it get to room temp, and then refresh it at least, I would say probably refresh it 3 or 4 times after you pull it out of the fridge before you use it for baking. So that way it's like revived, it's really active, really bubbly, nice and kind of sweet smelling, yeasty, like still sour, but like it kind of has like a young sweet smell to it. That's what you're looking for. So I do have some more questions here. How do I know if my starter is ready for baking? It will pass the float test, and you want to do it like right at the start of its peak. So when it starts to peak, like when it's peaking, it'll still be kind of domed from growing up, and it'll still be bubbly, and it should pass the float test. The float test, which I showed in my other video, and these will not pass the float test. They're too hungry. They need to be fed. But like you just get some water, dip your hand in water, pull off a piece of the starter, plop it in the water. If it floats, you have enough CO2 to bake. And so that's how you know.
You're welcome, guys. We love sharing this information.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. So Amy also asked about the vessel in which to cook. She says she doesn't have a cast iron oven, but she does have a Pyrex with a lid. How does she know when her loaf won't outgrow her Pyrex with the lid on? So, I hate to say it, but I don't think a Pyrex will work how you want it to work. Because like the thing about a Dutch oven is it basically gives you, like bakeries have like these big like brick ovens, like professional ovens that release steam and do all these other crazy things. A Dutch oven gives you like the same results that a professional bakery's oven would do in your home kitchen. And it does that because it creates like the heat it can capture, because it's cast iron is crucial, because you want it at a really hot temp like before you put your dough in. And like a Pyrex, I'm assuming it's like casserole dish Pyrex is, I'm thinking like normal without like a domed lid or anything like that. Your loaf like won't be able to grow, and a Pyrex is glass, and it doesn't have like, it doesn't
retain the heat,
conduct heat the same way cast iron does. So I think you need cast iron. I mean, you can Google around and see if there's like, just this is just from my research, from my experience. I haven't seen other methods that have worked well, and I don't think Pyrex would be a great method for baking bread, because I don't think it will give you what you want. But Google around, maybe there's a great alternative use, or because someone out there in this crazy sea of the internet has, I'm sure, tried 1,000 different methods for baking off bread. So see if there's any good alternatives, but I do recommend using cast iron. And there's one that a lot of these bread books really like, and it's like a, oh gosh, let me see if I can find a photo of it, but it's a, this really cool, it's like a domed combo cooker. That's what it's called, a combo cooker. Yeah, you can kind of see in this. This is Tartine Bread, an excellent book. I have it linked in my shop already. But like in the combo cooker, it's like shallow on the bottom, but you can see in this photo, it has a really big dome lid that goes on top. So it gives room for the bread to rise, and it captures the steam, which is crucial for like the first half of the bake. But yeah, I don't have one of these. They're great. I will link this also in my shop. I don't have it linked yet. I'll get it linked after this video. But yeah, that is kind of, it's a great option, and I know this is going to be like cheaper than getting like some really beautiful Dutch oven. And this is nice too, because putting your loaf into the bottom of the combo cooker, you're going to have, it's not going to be as easy to burn the sides of like the backs of your hands when you put it in. Okay, I'm trying to think what else. Oh, someone asked the last time about the fermented taste, and so I think I kind of, in a way, answered that. But so if you're refreshing, if you do like a bunch of refreshing of your starter, so if you do like what I said that I like to do, and you refresh it like twice the evening before, twice the morning of, like after, you have to refresh after it peaks, but you kind of rev up the process a little so it gets nice and bright and sweet smelling, then that's not going to have as overwhelming of a like funky fermented taste to it as it would if you're only refreshing like a couple times leading, like in the 24 hours before it's ready to use. So that can kind of help with getting away from like an overly fermented taste. And I'm trying to think what else. I mean, does anyone else have questions? I'm going to cut into one
Yeah,
of
we're
my
going to cut
loaves.
in. Oh, thank you, Catherine. Yeah, we love living here. It's beautiful.
We do. We have a really beautiful spot.
Yeah, this is kind of, so this is one of the loaves that is not a discard loaf.
Yeah, it's not. This is actually a new recipe. And that's the country loaf from Tartine Bread, because I've been following, I had a bigger cutting board, but this will be fine. I've been following Jennifer Latham, who's the head of bread at Tartine, on Instagram and watching her videos, so I wanted to try a new method, because I talked a lot about Tara Jensen from
Baker's Hands.
Baker's Hands, A Baker's Ears, her book, also wonderful. But yeah, so this past week, I've actually been having like just loaf disasters. I made Tara's bread that makes like the 4 loaves. It was the dough I think I was actually like turning the day I did my last live. And the next day when I baked it off, it just pancaked. It just deflated. I'm pretty sure the problem with that one was that it overproofed, which means it just had too long to rise, the dough. And so that was the issue. And then I tried the country loaf from Tartine Bread like 3 days ago, I want to say. And that one, it didn't deflate, it didn't overproof, but it didn't rise. It was like still dense. It didn't have that big open crumb that's really nice in sourdough. So that was a frustrating result. However, I kind of figured out that the issue was probably the flour I was using, because I have this really beautiful flour from Hayden Mills, which is this artisan mill company in Arizona. And their bread flour is like hard red spring, which is in most bread flours. And then they also mix in red fife, which is whole wheat. And so that, and I was adding red fife, so it was like 900 grams that bread flour and then 100 grams red fife. And whole wheat is just a much thirstier flour, and so I don't think it had enough hydration to do what it needed to do. So with these, I mixed in a chunk of all-purpose flour, because it's flour, which isn't as thirsty, and then mixed in the others, and I added a little bit more water to adjust hydration. I'm learning all about hydration and the baker's percentages and how that all comes together, and figuring out what works best for me and the flours I have on hand. But it finally rose like it was supposed to. My poo-poo loaves did not do this. So I'm excited to cut in and see what the crumb is. Get through the bottom here. Reveal. There we go. That's what we want.
Perfect.
That's a happy bread. I'm actually gonna have a slice. Do we have any other questions?
All right.
No other questions? Okay. Well, you guys, this has been fun.
If you do have questions, you can go to her website, which is linked in the top, or
Yeah, you can leave a question on the comment on my blog post that I have linked in the caption, and I'll answer your question. And if there's any other things you're thinking of or any other sourdough videos you'd like to see, let me know. I was hoping to be able to show you how I score and put the loaves in the Dutch oven today, but I didn't. I don't know, like it's hard because I kind of have to bake them off in the morning, otherwise they'll overproof. So I don't know how to time this unless Leanne is cool with me doing a morning live to show you guys how I.
Maybe we'll switch it up next time.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what works for her and her schedule. But yeah, and then if nothing else, like I can also probably try to figure out timing making the dough, so you can watch that process too. But yeah, this has been fun. I'm glad I got to answer some questions. If you have more, you know where to find me.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Bye.